There are songs that follow you quietly through life. They play in the background of late night drives, drift out of kitchen radios, and somehow end up stitched into your memory without asking permission. One of those songs begins with a simple question of devotion: what you would do, and what you would never do for love. For decades, millions of listeners believed that voice belonged to a black soul singer. It sounded too smooth, too wounded, too honest to be anything else. The horns were warm. The phrasing felt lived in. It carried the weight of rhythm and blues in a way that felt inherited, not borrowed. But the truth surprised many. That voice came from a man most people never pictured when they sang along. And yet, that revelation was never the most shocking part of his story. Because long after the applause faded, after the song became timeless, his life took a turn few fans ever saw. A simple trip to urgent care, a prescription meant to help, and a chain reaction that slowly took away the very thing that defined him. This is not just the story of a hit record, it is the story of how music crossed every boundary, and how pain, quietly and relentlessly, brought one artist to his knees. Long before his voice ever reached the radio dial, music was already part of the air he breathed. He was born in the summer of 1951 inches, Manhattan, but his story truly began when his family moved south to Miami. His parents were entertainers themselves, the kind who understood stages, lights, and the quiet discipline behind performance. Music was not a dream in that household. It was routine, it was work, it was normal. As a child, he sang for family and friends, not for ambition, but for joy. Just to hear laughter, just to feel connection. Around him were the sounds of big band records, smooth crooners, and elegant phrasing. Frank Sinatra, Nat, King Cole, Tony Bennett. Voices that valued control, emotion, and restraint. But Miami widened his ears. As he grew older, his taste expanded beyond the living room. Rock and roll, jazz, rhythm and blues, the raw energy of the Beatles, the fire of Jimi Hendrix, the precision of Led Zeppelin, and most of all, the soul coming out of Detroit and Philadelphia. Motown Records, Marvin Gaye, the Four Tops, the Temptations, music that spoke directly to the heart. At 10 years old, his parents enrolled him in piano lessons. He practiced because he was told to. But it was the guitar that changed everything. He saved money mowing lawns, bought his first instrument, and taught himself by listening hour after hour, rewinding records, learning by ear, letting rhythm guide his fingers. By 14, he had formed his first band. They rehearsed in garages, played school events, and chased the simple thrill of being heard. When that group ended, another followed. This time, the rooms were clubs and bars across Florida. Small stages, sticky floors, long nights. Then one night, everything shifted. A legend was in the audience. Little Richard heard something he liked. He didn't hesitate. He offered the band a job on the spot. For years, they toured the world together. Television appearances, major venues, Las Vegas. It was a masterclass in showmanship and survival. But when that chapter ended, reality hit hard. Record deals fell apart. Bands dissolved. Opportunities dried up. He moved west, then back home again, carrying demos and doubt in equal measure. For a moment, it felt like the dream had quietly passed him by. What he didn't know yet was that all those years of listening, learning, and losing were preparing him for a song the world would never forget. Success did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly in Miami, inside a record label best known for disco hits and dance floors. When he walked into TK Records, he carried his songs the only way he could afford to, stuffed inside a grocery bag. No entourage, no image, just music. The label listened. 2 days later, they signed him. They were looking for something different. Disco was fading. A smoother, Jazz-leaning R&B sound was beginning to rise. He recorded his debut album with confidence, but the label heard a problem. The songs were strong, they said, but there was no radio single. He disagreed. Then he went back into the studio. 2 days later, he returned with a song that would define his life. What You Won't Do for Love did not shout. It didn't chase trends. It simply spoke the truth of devotion and restraint, wrapped in warm horns and a melody that felt instantly familiar. When the label heard it, the decision was immediate, but another issue surfaced just as quickly. His sound felt undeniably rooted in rhythm and blues. His audience, they believed, would come from black radio. Yet his appearance complicated everything. Long hair, white skin, a face that did not match the voice listeners were about to fall in love with. So he made a choice that changed the outcome. Instead of putting his face on the album cover, he created distance, a drawn silhouette, a man sitting alone on a bench, no clear features, just mood, just mystery. The label embraced it. When the single was released in September of 1978, the response was overwhelming. The song climbed the charts, crossed formats, and lived comfortably on R&B stations. Listeners didn't ask questions. They felt it. Then came the night that tested everything. In Cleveland, Ohio, he opened for Natalie Cole on her first headlining tour. Thousands of fans filled the venue, almost all of them black. They knew the song. They loved the song. They had never seen the singer. When he walked onto that stage, the room fell silent. You could feel the shock before you could hear it. But 10 minutes later, none of that mattered. The voice was real. The feeling was undeniable. By the end of the set, the crowd was on its feet. That night became a turning point, not just for his career, but for what the music represented. It proved that soul was not owned by appearance. It belonged to honesty. The album went double platinum in the United States. In Japan, it went even further, and the song itself took on a life of its own, echoed, replayed, and reborn through generations. He had crossed the line from artist to timeless. After the first wave of success faded, the spotlight did not disappear, but it shifted. Record labels changed. TK Records collapsed under financial pressure. Deals were rearranged. Promotion weakened. In the United States, his presence on the charts became less predictable. But halfway across the world, something unexpected happened. Japan listened more closely. There, the music was not treated as nostalgia, it was treated as craft. His albums sold consistently. His tours sold out. Fans welcomed him not as a novelty, but as an artist with depth. They gave him a name of respect, Mr. AOR. For years, Japan became a place where the music still breathed freely. Back home, he adapted. When record deals disappeared, he did not stop working. He wrote for others, produced quietly. His melodies found new lives in films and on other artists' albums. Songs he helped create climbed charts, sometimes reaching #1, even when his own name wasn't on the cover. He returned to the stage in different forms: big band arrangements, orchestral projects, theater roles. For a time, balance returned. The music changed shape, but it never left him. Then, in 2017, everything unraveled. He was preparing for another tour in Japan when a simple cold sent him to urgent care. Nothing serious, a cough, a runny nose. He was prescribed medication meant to help him recover quickly. Instead, it did the opposite. Within days, his body began to fail him. He woke up unable to stand. His Achilles tendons were inflamed, then ruptured. Doctors were confused. They asked questions that made no sense. Had he jumped from somewhere? Had he injured himself? He hadn't. Further research revealed nerve-damaged peripheral neuropathy. Pain spread through his legs like fire. burning, hammering, relentless. Sensation disappeared from his fingertips. The hands that once shaped melodies could no longer feel the strings properly. But the bills didn't stop, so he kept performing, sometimes seated, sometimes with a cane, sometimes in a wheelchair. Night after night, he hid the truth from audiences, brushing off concern with jokes and excuses. Inside, he was suffering. Then came 2020. The world shut down. Touring stopped. Isolation set in. The pain intensified. Depression followed. His feet swelled so badly he could no longer wear shoes. Eventually, he made the hardest decision of his life. He walked away from music, not because he wanted to, but because his body had already taken it from him. In the United States, his story never fit neatly into a category. For black radio, his voice felt familiar long before his face was known. It lived comfortably alongside records from artists who defined rhythm and blues. When listeners eventually learned the truth, many didn't feel betrayed. They felt surprised and then strangely affirmed. The Cleveland concert became symbolic, a moment when assumptions collapsed and music stood alone. For American audiences, especially those who grew up with soul music, his career became a quiet reminder that authenticity is not owned by race. It is earned through listening, respect, and lived emotion. That is why his songs didn't just chart, they endured. In hip hop and modern R&B, his legacy deepened in another way. Producers didn't sample him for nostalgia. They sampled him for feeling. His melodies carried space. His chords carried restraint. From Tupac to Common, his music became a foundation for artists telling stories about love, struggle, and reflection. Each sample was a form of recognition passed from one generation to the next. Outside the United States, the response was even clearer. In Japan, his work was never treated as a trend. Fans showed up consistently, albums sold steadily, concert halls filled without explanation. He was respected as a craftsman, not a curiosity. That loyalty sustained him through years when the American industry had moved on. Then, there is the final chapter, one that extends beyond music. After his illness, his wife spoke publicly, not to accuse, but to warn. She urged people to read medication labels, to ask questions, to challenge assumptions that prescriptions are always harmless. In response, official agencies maintained that certain drugs remain necessary in severe cases, reinforcing a tension many Americans recognize too well: the balance between benefit and risk. For older audiences, in particular, that message landed close to home. How many times have we trusted without asking? How many warnings did we skip because we were tired, or sick, or in a hurry? His story became more than a musical biography. It became a quiet, cautionary tale about listening not only to records, but to our bodies, our instincts, and the questions we are sometimes afraid to ask. In the final months of his life, the man who once carried melodies across continents was moving slowly, carefully, one step at a time. He ate less. He lost weight. Pain had become a constant companion. Yet on the morning of his passing, something felt different. He emerged from the bedroom using his walker, alert, present. His wife was relieved to see him upright, moving, alive in a way that felt almost familiar. They sat together. Then, without warning, his body leaned toward her. And just like that, he was gone. After 6 years and 2 months of relentless pain, his suffering ended quietly there in the arms of the person who had witnessed every stage, every triumph, every loss. There were no cameras, no final performance, just silence. He was 71 years old. What remains is not defined by how he died, but by how deeply he lived inside the music. What You Won't Do for Love continues to drift through generations, not as a relic, but as a feeling. It lives in covers, in samples, in late night radio hours when memories feel closer than words. It stands among the greatest love songs ever recorded, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. His legacy also carries a quieter lesson. Read the warnings, ask the questions. Never assume that routine means harmless. His wife spoke out not in anger, but in hope that someone else might pause, might ask a doctor one more question, might be spared a pain that changed everything. And perhaps that is the final gift of his story. That music has no color. That devotion can sound like restraint. And that dignity does not disappear when the lights go out. If this song has ever meant something to you, if it has ever carried you through a moment, share that memory below. And if you value stories told with care, honesty, and respect, consider staying with us. Some voices fade, others never truly leave.